That tornado just went through Vergennes. I've got a visual on it right now. This thing is huge.
Greetings and welcome back to Laubach Storm Chasing. I am meteorologist Tony Laubach, bringing to you today the video chase log from the February 28th, 2017 nighttime event where I intercepted the EF-4 tornado between Perryville and Christopher near the town of Vergennes in Jackson County, Illinois. This event was very well advertised, in fact so much so, about 10 days prior to that, at the Storm Chaser Convention in Denver, I'd actually made mention to some friends who I was actually flying out to visit in Arizona the following weekend, thinking that my trip might actually be in jeopardy because at that time it was kind of unsure when that event was going to roll through the area, but it was pretty obvious ahead of time that there was going to be some kind of fairly significant event somewhere in the region, and that proved to be the case. When Wednesday rolled around, I had given enough of the look at the models to where I actually moved my flight. Now, I flew out to Phoenix on Saturday and was originally supposed to fly back to St. Louis on Tuesday night, but that Wednesday, after getting a look at everything and kind of getting an idea that this was going to be a big time event, I actually moved my flight up to Monday night so that I could be back in town for Tuesday. Now, the Storm Prediction Center, while they had talked about it for several days prior to releasing a graphic outlook on that, finally did kind of highlight some of the region early on. I think it was like in the day 5, and kind of was hinting that there would be a significant event. Now, the problem with this event going in, we knew the main brunt of it for us in Southern Illinois was going to be in the overnight, and that was pretty obvious there early on. But my biggest question heading into the day was would there be some daytime opportunities somewhere north of our area before the nighttime stuff rolled in. The problem, of course, I had working for the news station down here and knowing that this was going to be a fairly big event for us is I actually had to stay fairly close to town. So my northernmost targets for the day weren't going to be any further north than I-70 in Illinois. And of course, we saw that there were several good daytime tornadoes much further north than that. But I didn't want to put myself out of position for the nighttime stuff, which I knew was going to be a big issue. So heading into that morning, it was kind of odd for me because I'm not used to living in an area that is under this kind of threat. In fact, I am notorious, historically notorious, for never being around for the events that strike close to home. When I lived in Colorado, I never had a good tornado day up until I moved. So living there for 13 years, never had a good tornado day. Finally moved, and then I've had like 3 or 4 since then. And of course, that was the case with this event too. Now, keeping in mind, I had a trip. I was gone that weekend in Arizona, actually moved the flight up a day to get back in time for this, and I'm not sure Mother Nature quite understood that that had happened because the event still took place. But what the funny part for me was when I got back the next day and was looking over some of the models that morning, some of those I think got a hold of what I call the Tony's in town parameter, and actually one of the high-res models had like storms way to the north of us, storms down to the south of us, and nothing in the middle of Southern Illinois. So I thought that for me was kind of funny that Mother Nature was aware now, or at least the models were aware that I was in town. So that was kind of quirky. But waking up was very weird having to be in the middle of that. Of course, they had issued the enhanced risk early on. They hadn't quite gone moderate yet, even though I kind of had an assumption, and I kind of mentioned it in some of the texts that I had back and forth with some friends of mine, that they probably would go moderate later on in the evening because some of the parameters I was looking at indicated that this was going to be a very big deal for parts of Southern Illinois as the evening went on, and probably produce something fairly significant. Now, of course, I'm not going to say that we knew there would be an EF-4 tornado on the ground for 50 miles, but the parameters were certainly there, and this was an event we were watching very, very closely. But for me, it was killing time during the day because knowing that any target I had was no more than an hour away, it was kind of like, what do I do with myself? So I actually went and hung out at the news station for most of the morning before I finally decided to head out when the first storm started to fire in Missouri. So I'm going to pick it up there for that storm chase. So please enjoy this video chase log of the February 28th, 2017 storm chase event. So the storm that got me on the road was a severe warning storm that was making its way through eastern Missouri toward the river. And given I didn't want to cross the river, I stopped just outside of Redbud to let the storm come at me. While I was waiting, it gave me one decent photo op before it moved across the river and literally shriveled up like a little turd just to my north, barely even giving me a drop of rain. With still some daylight left, I decided to take a shot at the storms that were making their way into the southern part of the St. Louis metro area, and I was going to make my intercept on the Illinois side in East St. Louis. Now, prior to this storm getting to me, it was reported to have golf ball sized hail, so it would figure that by the time it got to me, that hail size would actually dramatically decrease. Now, I was figuring at this point the storm was going to do the same one as the previous storm and shrivel up. But once it rolled over me and was moving too fast for me to catch, of course it would go on to produce 2-inch diameter hails and move further north and away from me. So kind of a frustrating start for me, having one storm die and then the second storm produce such small hail when it got to me, while it produced such large hail around me. By this point, night had started to fall, but I had one more chance to get under a storm with this cluster of cells that had moved up across the river just to the south of St. Louis, and I made my initial intercept in the Redbud area, where I did get treated to a little bit bigger hail than what I saw just a little bit earlier. So after dinking around in the hail for a little bit, I made my way down to Chester, where I kind of took a little bit of a break, got me a little bit of food and some gas just to get recharged and set up. By this point, earlier in the day, the SPC had already upgraded us to a moderate risk and slapped that 15% hatch tornado prog basically straight across southern Illinois. Now, oddly enough for me, the axis of this was pretty much right over my house. So again, this was really one of the first times I had actually dealt with something like this so close to home. Well, with that moderate risk, we were starting to get into that window that the SPC was concerned about after dark, and the storm that I was starting to watch, I started to touch on that a little bit there as my focus of attention when I did that Facebook update there on my professional page.
Welcome to a live update from Chester, Illinois. Have kind of taken a little brief intermission here, waiting for this guy, a storm we've been watching for a while now, to push its way across I-55, which is this highway running right through here. Tornado warning has just been issued for the Perryville area, which is under this cluster of dots right here. And we'll cross the river and might end up being a play on Route 13 here in Illinois. It's something we're watching. Like I said, it's currently sitting in Chester right now. Just stopped, topped off gas. Starting to see the lightning from the storm. And again, if you're just tuning in here, that is the storm that we are watching, and hopefully it'll come into focus here. There we go. So this is the storm. I'm right up here in Chester. I'm going to work my way down 3 and then head over and get into the more open area outside of the river. The river crossing is the main reason why I have not gone after that storm. It's been tornado warned now for almost a couple hours. I would be willing to estimate something along those lines. This we knew was going to be a nighttime event, and what we're starting to see is the beginnings of that. Obviously, this storm right here is the one we're watching, but you're starting to see development all over this area here, and they're thinking this is going to end up being a cluster of supercells that is going to move through the area. So I think the worst part for the highlighted areas, the 15% hatch that went out today, is yet to come, and this is something we were expecting. We're approaching 8 o'clock now. Now, of course, this storm that is approaching Perryville right now is one of note. That one looks like it's probably going to stay, I would say, south of Rockwood, south of Ava, but probably north of like the Carbondale area if it continues on its present course. And of course, maintaining that intensity is something too that is worth watching. I'm going to go ahead and start to make my way down to the southeast and get in front of this storm. Now, obviously, now it's dark. Chasing dynamic is much different here, but in an area I'm much more familiar with, I'll be able to navigate a little bit easier as that storm crosses the river. That right now is the only thing I am waiting for. I am not going to go over to Missouri to try and intercept this thing. I'm going to wait for it to come to the Illinois side of the line. Some thunder, woohoo! I'm going to take that as my cue to go ahead and wrap this up, and I just wanted to give an update.
So after I closed out that video, I made my way down Route 3. Now that is a southeastern route that actually connects up to 149, which goes into Murfreesboro, which was my original plan. But en route, I saw that Route 151 actually cuts up into Ava straight on from the south. That was actually a road that I hadn't thought about until I saw it on my map, which was a good thing because shortly after I left Chester is when I started hearing the reports that a significant tornado was ongoing in Perryville, knowing it was crossing the river. So at this point now, I knew it was a race to get back out into the open areas. I was trying to get basically over to 127, which was the north-south road that went between Murfreesboro and Pinckneyville, and that was kind of the road that I was planning my intercept on at this point. When I got to Route 151, I stopped for about 10 seconds, literally taking a ruler, putting it across my laptop screen so I could actually measure the distance from where the storm was on radar to where it got to 151, just to make sure that I had enough time to get north to Ava and then get east out of the way of this thing. And I gave myself about a 5 to 10 minute window thinking I should be able to make it. Now, I had to drive a little bit fast, and my bigger concern wasn't so much the tornado, it was as that storm moved in, if I was going to get hit with strong winds that were going to start taking down trees, because that 151 route runs through a lot of wooded area, and I did not want to get stuck on the road with a bunch of trees coming down, whether it be from the forward flank winds, the RFD winds, an inflow jet, or even the tornado itself. That was my biggest concern. Fortunately, I made it to Ava with no big issues, and as soon as I got into town, of course, the core was starting to clip, and I was actually getting 1-inch hail there in town, and that's when I started sending out text messages to my weather crew back at Channel 3, kind of informing them of what it was going on that I was seeing. Now, this worked out great for me because it kind of gave me a timestamp as I went along, but once I got situated just east of Ava, we was able to stop and kind of start to look back to the west and see what was coming at me, knowing that there was a tornado on the ground.
Alrighty, folks, it is 8:26 p.m. Confirmed tornado on the ground just to the southwest of Ava, which, as you can see by the icon on my screen there, where I just came from. And this is looking out to the west. Lightning going on right now, lots of it. Cannot confirm visually the tornado at all. So many trees and everything else in the way, but...
The most terrifying part, when everybody asks me, are you ever scared of chasing? And other than lightning, I usually say no, but this was a terrifying moment. I was sitting there trying to get a visual on this tornado, now keeping in mind that there's still a lot of wooded area between me and this tornado, and I'm hearing the wind. I'm starting to hear the roar, literally hearing the roar in the trees off to my west. Now, I can't see it, but I can hear it. And while that was pretty nerve-wracking all on its own, when it started to get terrifying for me was when I actually started hearing the trees snapping. That's when it got real, and that's when it got a little scary, because I'm hearing the wind, now I'm hearing the tree snapping, and I'm hearing it clearly. And at this point, I have no idea if it's closer to me, further than me. I'm still having a hard time seeing it. So that right there was my immediate cue to go ahead and get situated on 127. And I knew pretty much this was making a beeline for Vergennes, or just to the south of Vergennes. So I knew I had to get to that point on the highway before the tornado did. That was where I was ultimately going to be making my intercept. I never saw the tornado as it was heading south of Ava toward me. All I could do was hear the roar and the tree snapping, and that was probably one of the most frightening sounds I've ever heard in my years of storm chasing. Now, I made very quick work of actually getting over to 127, and I positioned myself just south of Vergennes, kind of figuring it was going to cross just to my north, somewhere between me and the actual town. I was very, very hopeful the tornado was going to stay south of town. Now, one of the issues with chasing at night is, as I mentioned, the situation awareness. When you're chasing during the day, situational awareness in my mind is much easier because you're thinking about a lot of things, but there are some things that you're not thinking about that sometimes come to you because you see something that reminds you, oh yeah, this is an issue. Well, what ended up happening with me coming into this here is, as I was pulling up to my spot, there were no telephone poles that I visually could see off on the side of the road. Now, I've traveled this road a million times before, but again, without actually seeing the telephone poles there because they're farther off the road, it did not give me that reminder of, oh yes, you are standing downwind of where that RFD is going to come through, and those poles are likely going to fall across the road. Now, fortunately, again, because those telephone poles were far enough off the road, that actually did not happen. But what ended up happening, and you'll hear it, you won't see it, but when the RFD came in and the poles came down, the wires that snapped came flying across the road, and when they did, they actually hit my van, and you hear the wiper start to scream because one of the passenger side wiper actually got taken off, along with the radio antennas on the roof of my car, completely decapitated off of the van, and that was what I'm assuming to be one of the wires. Now again, I don't see it, you can't see it in the video, and I can't confirm that, but it's the only thing that I can think of that happened, and you do hear something hit the van. Now, it wasn't anything strong, I didn't feel a giant thud or anything along those lines, but it's one of those reasons that make chasing at night so difficult, because you lose that situational awareness. And as my chase partners in the past will tell you, I'm very, very cognizant of that RFD, because having studied with Twistex for as long as I have, it's something I was very well aware of in positioning. But because I did not see the telephone poles, because they were so far off the road, I completely spaced out. Oh yeah, that is going to be an issue, because in my mind, I thought I was clear.
Visual on it as the RFD came through, so I knew I was far enough south where the tornado itself wasn't going to hit, so I felt like I was in a very safe spot to let this thing cross. Unfortunately, it moved out over the field and started to make its way toward Elkville.
Mike, that tornado just went through Vergennes. I've got a visual on it right now. Call me right now. Just call me on the station line right now. This thing is huge. All right.
So when the RFD cleared, it became very apparent immediately where the tornado was. I could actually see the power flashes lighting this thing up. Now, I am on the phone with my news director, and we're setting up to do a live as this is going on. And of course, you can kind of hear the sense of urgency in my voice that, yes, we have a tornado on the ground, and it's very, very damaging. Wasn't very long after that across the road where I immediately saw the house that was destroyed when that tornado crossed the road up in front of me.
Hello.
Now, I don't have the actual phoner of the on-air broadcast because we hadn't started recording at that point yet, but you can hear the audio of my phone report as I am sitting there on scene.
I'm in Vergennes. I've got view of a very large tornado on the ground. It has just moved through Vergennes. Route 13 on the south side of Vergennes is blocked. There is debris in the road. Substantial damage has just occurred in this area. I cannot get into town. I have a destroyed structure, a roof completely detached off to the side of the road. Power lines are also across. I'm seeing this thing as it continues to move off to the east. A very, very defined cone doing power flashes is being illuminated with the power flashes as this moves east, probably toward the Elkville area right now. If you are in Elkville, you need to take caution right now. This is a damaging tornado. It is on the ground right now. It has done damage in Vergennes.
So after the report, my first concern obviously was the occupants of the house, and there were a lot of people on the road at this point too. So I'm kind of trying to get a bearing, get an idea of what's going on with the situation. Now, the occupants of the house emerge pretty quickly, and we find out that they are actually all unarmed.
Are you guys okay?
Big issue that we did have is a propane tank from that yard blew across the road into the ditch, and it was actually spewing gas. So we kind of had to clear everybody a little bit further back. So I had navigated my van over to the north side of the house. I still could not proceed because debris in the road, but I was kind of parked sideways across, which I was hoping would not only keep anybody from driving over to where the propane tank was, but also alert somebody that there was debris in the road that they probably weren't going to see if they were coming down this way. But by this point, traffic in both directions was stopped.
Sure that the people down here at the Wiles house is okay. They can get up that way yet.
They should be fine. That's the direction I came from. I was
Okay.
literally sitting where that car was parked when it came through.
When it came through, I pulled up over here just to hear where it was at because I couldn't see it. I said, oh crap, there it is.
Yeah.
I beat it to the county line. Oh boy.
Now, I was on scene there for a little while until the road did get cleared. Now, I tried to continue my way down Elkville Road, and that tornado actually later crossed Elkville Road, and I came across an area where there was a down power pole, and actually several homes around the area were destroyed. And again, it was another roadblock set up there, and I did another phoner kind of talking about that issue as I was trying to make my way back out to the east and eventually get back south.
And Tony Laubach is back with us. Tony has been stranded in the Vergennes area because of debris across the road. Tony, are you able to move yet?
I was able to get out of Vergennes. I actually tried to get across on Elkville Road, about 3 miles west of town. They've got the road blocked. There is a power pole blocking the road. And in this area, there are also numerous homes that have been damaged or destroyed. I am sitting at a roadblock right now. I can see off in one of these yards a vehicle, a large vehicle, looks like a truck of some sort, on its side. And people are directing cars trying to get around some of this debris here between Elkville and Vergennes right now. So it looked like the tornado probably crossed somewhere in the along Elkville Road and Copper Road, which is about 3 miles west of Elkville. This was a very stout tornado when it went through here for sure. Hard time getting around. If you're in this area, you want to avoid it if you can, particularly in the Vergennes to Elkville line. You're going to have a very, very difficult time getting through. A lot of damage. A lot of people are out and about right now. Strongly recommend, if you are in the area, to do not approach these areas. Emergency crews are trying to get to various scenes, structures. There are numerous homes along these county roads, Elkville Road, all these places that took direct hits and substantial damages. As I mentioned earlier, with the house near Vergennes, completely blown over with the roof detached. So we're probably looking at a pretty substantial tornado as it moves through here. So stay away from these areas if you can, and definitely stay covered because obviously we've got more storms coming up the pike.
And Tony, certainly you and I share thoughts all the time when we're talking about tornadoes and severe weather. I am very concerned with the storm that's developing in southeast Missouri right now and current projected paths. Have you looked at that storm and have you considered redirecting so that you can get over and help us with that one if it does continue to build? Because currently the projected track puts that one a little closer to southern Jackson County, maybe northern Union County. My concern is a wiggle could get that close to a whole lot of folks.
Well, I am working my way south. Like I said, I'm trying to get to 51 right now. My plan right now is to get south on 51 to get down to the 13th corridor. I've been watching that storm on radar very carefully. Intermittent data in here. That's another thing, too, to notice. If you are in this area, you might be having some issues with some of your cellular services.
So I eventually got out of the damage track there of the tornado near Elkville and was able to make my way south on 51. Now, my hope, and again, I was limited on data because of some of the cellular issues, but my hope was I could make it to the Walmart there over between Carbondale and Murfreesboro to actually get my wiper replaced. But when I arrived there and got data and finally got some updated radar, I noticed that storm was already much closer, did not allow me that kind of time. So I relocated back to Carbondale and actually parked myself at the Kroger parking lot there on the east side of town and waited for that storm to come at me. Now, at this point, a tornado warning was issued saying there was a confirmed tornado reported near Cedar Lake. So this was now southwest of Carbondale, heading in my direction. So I was thinking right now we are in a lot of trouble if this thing actually stays on the ground. Pushed its way into town, some very, very strong winds and rain came with it, so I actually started to make my way out to the east. Along 13, kind of paralleling with this storm. Now, the area of interest was south of 13 at this point, so I still cannot see any tornadoes as I made my way to 13. Now, apparently, per the NWS damage survey a few days later, there was a couple of tornadoes with this storm, the one near Cedar Lake, and then one over by the airport there between Carterville and Marion, crossing 13. Now, that I never saw while I was on 13, and it was likely at this point I was probably behind that area of circulation, or the area of circulation was behind me and I never saw it. But the damage reported was limited mostly to trees, so there were no power flashes that I noticed with this particular storm. So once I got into Marion and hit I-57, I went north to try to get one more shot at the storm as it crossed near Johnson City, and as I was northbound on 57, that's when I saw the semi-truck in the center median that was blown over into that. And then went into Johnson City to kind of see if there was any damage or hail left over from the storm as it passed through. Not witnessing much damage in the Johnson City area and no hail. That pretty much put a wrap on my storm chase day as I made it back to the station shortly thereafter and started putting together everything that I had seen for the day. So after doing my wrap-up package at the station, I eventually made my way home to Murfreesboro. When I got home, my hope was I was going to be able to take a little nap. Now, there was another round coming in, and that was the squall line that was supposed to come through in the middle of the night with the cold front. And it didn't give me a whole lot of time at home. I'd kind of settled in bed, and it wasn't long thereafter where the tornado siren started going off. There was a tornado warning with the squall line as it came through our area. Now, at this point, my van was parked in the garage and all my camera gear was still in there, so I really didn't have the opportunity to go out and film. So I just went on the porch and kind of watched as it came down, as the hail came down pretty heavily there for a little bit there. I snapped a picture in the front yard as some of it covered the ground, but that kind of went through, other than that, with very, very little fanfare. So the following morning I went out and did some of the damage coverage, namely in the Vergennes area. I wanted to kind of stick with the areas where I had witnessed the tornado, and that was mainly from the Vergennes area to the Elkville Road area. And the damage during the day, of course, is always much more revealing than it is overnight. Lots of homes in this area were damaged or completely destroyed, just debris strewn everywhere. It was quite a humbling sight to see. And again, so close to home. Now, from my house at the time to this area was just a little under about 5 miles to the closest point, and then it was 6 or 7 miles from that. So to have a tornado of that magnitude so close to where I lived, you knew the area, you knew some of the people. It was definitely an interesting experience to be so close to something like that. But spent a good chunk of the morning walking around the Vergennes area there and Weir Road, where a lot of the damage took place, and just a heartbreaking sight for these families that had to go through that. But fortunately, for this tornado in the Illinois part of it, there were no fatalities, and I think very, very few injuries. The only fatality with this tornado was on the highway in Missouri. So fortunately, with the luck of the tornado not hitting more densely populated areas and people actually heeding the warnings, I think we avoided a much worse disaster in terms of human life than we did with the property damage. So for the first real chase of the season, this was a huge event. In total, I saw 6 storms, intercepted 5 of them. 1 of them intercepted me. I'm not going to count that last storm, the squall line overnight, as a storm I intercepted, because it really doesn't count when I walk from my front door to my front porch. Well, maybe I walk from my bedroom to my front porch, but nonetheless, that is not a storm intercept on my part. That one came to me. But in total, 6 storms I saw total on the day, 5 of which I intercepted, and that 6th one was the squall line after dark. Only saw the 1 tornado. Of course, it was the biggie. I intercepted the EF-4 tornado that moved out of Perryville. I caught it near Vergennes and saw it as it moved out toward Elkville. The storm that I intercepted between Carbondale and Marion did go on to produce 2 tornadoes, according to the National Weather Service, neither of which I was able to see either due to rain or positioning. In total, I drove 335 miles round trip, and for one of the few times I did not have to leave the state of Illinois. Most of the storms actually came to me on this day. Well, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you made it to this point, I hope that you enjoyed the video. Please give it a like or a comment. Given that this is my first real attempt at making a chase log video, I know this was rather long, but there was a lot to cover with this. Please leave some comments below. Let me know what I could have done better, what I could have done worse, suggestions for future ones. Anything you got would be absolutely great. I want to send a special thank you out to Skip Talbot for allowing me the usage of his tornado video from that day. That was at the beginning of the clip. I've posted some links to his social media and websites down below in the description, so please give those a look if you would. And I do look forward very much to seeing you again on another video here on Laubach Storm Chasing. Again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.